Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix on women's MMA with Got You Covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and I hope you are doing perfectly fine. You are healthy. If your state right now is going through a period of lockdown, if you live in another country, whether it be Abu Dhabi or the Philippines, Russia, Japan, Korea, as long as you are safe, that's what really matters in the end. Wash your hands, and hopefully you have your batch of toilet paper prepped up right for you, and you didn't run out, just like everyone else did when they went to the grocery store. So, let's talk about some general MMA news now. Before we dive deep into specifically women's MMA, let's look at UFC 249. If there's anybody in this world right now who is as stressed about mixed martial arts than, well, me, it's probably Dana White. Dana White, as of right now, is going through multiple changes, multiple plans are being rearranged, locations are being rebooked. There are events that are from previous UFC MMA events that are being rebooked yet again for the future, probably on Christmas time. We got a new fight coming up at UFC 249. It basically is complete and total pandemonium when it comes to UFC 249. It is updated that the fight that was cancelled recently, which was Francis Ngannou versus Rosenstrike, will be rescheduled at UFC 249. Is it going to replace anything? I'm not really sure if it's going to replace anything. So, while UFC 249 is continuing, we got a mixed bag of fighters reporting in very different news. We have some fighters that might be dropping in, like a Conor McGregor, which is rumored. It was rumored that Colby Covington might somehow participate in UFC 249. So far, Jessica Andrade she converted her house into a gym because her gym got closed off because of the coronavirus, COVID-19. So in order to make up for her gym being closed down, she converted her, garage into a gym with punching bags, weight room. It's nothing really new, honestly. I expect almost every athlete at this point to have that. If you look at NBA players, their houses and their mansions, they have built-in basketball courts. Like Floyd Mayweather has a built-in boxing gym to work on. I currently have an underground gym that I kind of utilize with my garage. I got weights, I got punching bag, I got what I need to work out downstairs pretty much. So we got people who are utilizing their fight camp not in the most efficient way they can, really. It's a lot more efficient. I'm a firm believer that you get a better workout or you're getting better training through an actual facility than you do just at home, because if working out at home was very easy, then there wouldn't be that much people who are overweight currently nowadays in America. So, Jessica Andrade has converted her house into a gym. Meanwhile, top fighter, former champion in Rose Namajunas, she pretty much she's nowhere to be seen, really. We got little to no updates on Rose Namajunas lately. The things are coming out of her, which is very interesting considering that we don't know what her status is for the upcoming fights. She's pretty much blacked out herself from social media and from any news outlets. People are unsure of where Rose Namajunas will be by UFC 249. Off the basis that last time that Rose Namajunas was talking to people like Ariel Helwani and other MMA journalists, she was talking about how she lacked the passion for love. She lacked her passion. She lacked her enjoyment. She lacked the love for MMA fighting anymore. She was thinking of an early retirement. I was discussing with one of my friends about Rose Namajunas' career trajectory right now. Even though she's really young, I think she's around 26 or 27 years old. She's around 26 or 27 years old. And I got people in my circle right now who are discussing that Rose Namajunas might already be getting into that void as a gatekeeper already, which I find amazing considering the fact that she was at one point considered the best women's fighter in the world just about a year and a half ago. If someone told me a year and a half ago that Rose Namajunas was the number one fighter in the world, I would definitely agree with you. There was her, Nunes, Chris Cyborg. Nunes was up there into being considered the most marketable women's fighter in all of MMA right after Amanda Nunes and after Cyborg. And so nobody knows where she's at currently right now, but UFC 249, it's in a very interesting place right now in MMA history. It'll be funny when you look back at this. So for the new location for UFC 249, I'm reiterating this from another podcast that I did, but originally UFC 249 was going to take place in the Barclays Center in New Jersey, but the New York State is going through a period of lockdown at this point. And during the period of lockdown, it's also happening here in Las Vegas. I mean, it's happening here in California. It's happening in Las Vegas, and it's happening in other parts of this of states and some other countries. It's that only essential buildings will be considered open. Will be considered open. And so, like, some facilities, some locations, anything that pertains to, like, the entertainment industry is going to be closed. So you have places like a JCPenney is going to be closed, and Macy's are going to be closed. Walmart is going to be open because it's considered a grocery store. Walmart, Targets, what other grocery stores are nearby here? Big Guys. I think there's a store here called Big Guys. It's very local to me. That's considered open. Banks, hospitals, county offices. Those places are considered essential to a community. And so they are open. So those places are open. But, a place like GameStop or, H&M, those places are closed. But also events in the general sense are also being closed. There's a band here called BTS coming to the Santa Clara area. There's a band called BTS, one of the biggest bands in the world. They're coming to Santa Clara, and their event might be canceled because the city of San Francisco, as well as Los Angeles, is going through a period of lockdown. So people are not like... It's not that you're allowed to walk outside, it's just the governor of your state, or the mayor, or those who run within the city, or the state, are advising people to not go outside. So in California, specifically Southern California, there's a huge party that was happening in like Huntington Beach, and Newport Beach, but because of the mandatory shutdown, the mandatory lockdown of the city of Los Angeles and the Southern California area, beaches and parks are now closed, and you're not allowed. And now we have police officers telling people to not go into any of these events. So recreational events are not publicly going to be accepted due to a lockdown. But a city that's not going through this problem, a state that is not going through this problem, would be Florida. Even though Dana White has not said that it's going to be in Florida, the general populace can make an educated guess that it's going to be in Florida. Why Florida? Because the people in Florida, they do not care about this current issue of the coronavirus / COVID-19. They really don't. For the past week, ever since the United States have really taken like seriousness when it comes to this pandemic, the people of Florida, they're perfectly fine, man. They're treating every day exactly the same normal. They're going to Florida partying, they're going to clubs and partying. Their city hasn't gone through a period of lockdown. I know, like, San Antonio, Texas has gone through a period of lockdown, which is very strange to me, but Miami, Florida, that place is perfectly fine. We got people partying around. Although COVID-19 is known, it's kind of considered a joke in that state or city. There was a huge party that happened to which 9 people were diagnosed with coronavirus. I follow a lot of journalists and other people in the world media that are talking about COVID-19, who are also sports journalists, and a lot of them have very negative viewpoints of the Miami, Florida area because they just don't care about the general issue that's happening in the world, really. But people have to remember that COVID-19 affects purely those who are elderly or people around 55 and over, and since Florida is in the general sense has a huge, like, there's a fine line of disparity and indifference between the elderly community and people who are under 40 years old. There's a lot of old people in the Florida area, but they are often like ignored at, really. Like, I think America in the general sense is known for not respecting the elders. Florida, a lot of people there who are under 40 years old do not respect anyone else 55 and over. So that's the Florida area in a nutshell. They don't really care about COVID-19. And you got people like Dana White who really want to push UFC 249 no matter what happens, and he himself doesn't respect COVID-19 that much to be a major issue for the UFC event to not continue on. Dana White is gonna try to push towards Florida, a place that will allow UFC 249 to take place, that are not as rugged, that are not as strict, because he can't do it in California, he can't do it in Las Vegas, he can't do it in New York. All those cities are on lockdown. Dana White himself is currently going through like a period of lockdown, to which he's in his home, he's spending time with his family, and he can't really leave his house. So Florida really is the next step, the next best location, because it's the only other location out there that's kind of big, as a big market, that doesn't look at the coronavirus to be that much of an issue to go close down events and buildings. And right after the break, we got some controversial words coming in from former UFC women's fighter Leslie Smith, coming up right after the break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. A person who is not happy with the UFC would be former UFC bantamweight contender in Leslie Smith. So Leslie Smith, she fulfilled her contract just last month. She's no longer with the UFC, and she's currently with Bellator competing for their bantamweight women's belt. She's not leaving quietly thanks to a labor complaint. By the way, this comes from MMAmania.com. Thanks to a labor complaint filed against UFC on Wednesday with the United States National Labor Relations Board (NLRB), one that accuses her former employer of cutting Smith loose as punishment for all the union talk. From labor attorney Lucas Middlebrook via MMA Fighting, Leslie Smith was one of the only UFC fighters willing to openly exercise her rights to join, or assist a union. Zuffa, with the termination of Ms. Smith, has delivered an unlawful message to the reminder of its fighter employees, which is dare to join, or assist a union, and you too will accompany Ms. Smith, not fighting in the UFC. This message contravenes the very purpose of the NLRA, and Zuffa cannot be allowed to continue floating the act. No person or entity is above the law. Smith is behind Project Spearhead, a Democratic fighter-led organization wherein fighters make all associated decisions, including hiring professionals and associative governments free from outside influence. The goal is to create a fighters' union. Alright, so fighters' unions. This has always been a topic of discussion all the time. There have been multiple. Last time I checked, there are well more than, I think, like three or five of them. I can't name them right now, but there are different fighters who are part of different unions or different sub organizations or collaborations with other fighters. So unionization, even unions are not even alongside with other unions. And the issue with unions is the fact that, it's so subjective on where money should definitely go to. There's this idea that the how much money, because there are always fighters, whether it be boxing or mixed martial arts or even in real sports like football, basketball, baseball, and that we have athletes who are constantly trying to bargain with one another, who are constantly bargaining that they believe that their value that they bring into the sport is a lot more higher or a lot more lower than some other sports athletes out there. So it doesn't make any sense. Here's an issue that people have with unions, essentially, is that you can't really value every individual who is part of a union to be an equal member to the group. That's essentially socialism to an extent. There are some fighters that are deserving of the $1 million contract, and there are some fighters whose popularity isn't enough, so they are stuck in the undercard. And it essentially turned a lot of people who are supporting unionization. You don't see them, you don't see Conor McGregor, or you don't see Amanda Nunes. You don't see Ronda Rousey. You don't see Chris Halbert. You don't see any of the current champions right now, or any of the top fighters really vying for unionization at all. You got fighters like Donald Cerrone, Brendan Schaub, Ben Rothwell. You got fighters who are not champions, decent fighters, but they're not champions, or they're in a position where they can go bargain for their contract or for their pay. I agree with a lot of fighters, including Leslie Smith, that these fighters should be paid higher off the basis that UFC is supposed to be the number one mixed martial arts organization in the world, right? So if you make it to the UFC, that means you hit it big. Well, That's not what I get. That's not what I see. I always keep saying I have a lot of friends in a lot of powerful areas around the Silicon Valley that make a lot more money than a whole lot of these UFC. I got friends who, by the way, are still currently in college and through their internships alone are making a lot more money, times multiples than that of UFC fighters. I got a friend who's only 26, 27 years old, currently working at Google, and he's making bank he's making more money within 1 year than a lot of these fighters do end up making in 5 years in the industry of being a professional fighter. It's not the smartest thing to do unless you're special, you really are special, to dive deep into a career in MMA fighting. Unless you know how to hustle, really. Or unless you're like not every fighter is gonna be like Conor McGregor. Not every fighter is gonna be, like Couture. Not every fighter is gonna be Ronda Rousey. The chances of you ending up, there's so many fighters in the UFC roster, and the probabilities of you making $1 million is very, very low. If you are even in the UFC. So, now a member of Bellator's featherweight division, this coming from MMAfighting.com, Leslie Smith finds herself in the thick of the title hunt. She's only won one since joining the promotion last July, but given her reputation and the relatively thin contenders line at 145, Smith is likely 1 or 2 wins away from a rematch with current champion Chris Cyborg. Chris Cyborg also coming from the UFC. MMA Fighting spoke to Smith prior to her recent booking at Bellator 241, an event that was postponed amid concerns about the coronavirus, when she was supposed to fight the streaking Jessie Meal, with the winner presumably moving up the rankings. So this article goes on to talk about Leslie Smith's opinion or viewpoints on the idea of money fights and the fact that if you're in the undercard, you have to work your way really, really up to go and fight against top contenders, while there are some people who are bypassing that. I can easily see fighters like Paige Van Zandt and Sage Northcutt, or any fighter from Dana White's Contender Series, who are just given the jetpack straight up, and they're immediately performing in big events with a higher paycheck than some journeyman fighters. She talks about winning streaks and losing streaks. She doesn't like the fact that Yoel Romero and Jose Aldo are receiving title shots while on losing streaks. She goes on to say, I think it's unfortunate because it makes a mockery of the merit-based aspects of a fighter working their way up to reach a title shot. I think Israel Adesanya vs. Romero is an appealing fight. However, do I think it should take precedence over everybody else that's worked their way up for a title? No, I don't. That's kind of the whole point of winning, is that you're supposed to be working your way up and getting higher ranked and getting a title shot. I don't think there's anything wrong with any promotion putting together an exciting fight. It's a super fight, basically. It's a super fight with a title on the line, but I think it would be nice if there were 2 categories, a super fight category and then a merit-based championship category. So Leslie Smith is talking about your merit should be the basis of why you get a title shot. So I'm thinking back to recent UFC events here, and I will say that Yoel Romero, he is definitely deserving of a title shot against Israel Adesanya. Yoel Romero is definitely in line for a title match against Israel Adesanya. I don't think he's gonna get it in the near future, but we need to look at these fighters' most recent performances to gauge whether or not they deserve, title fights. I think it was ridiculous to have someone like a GSP who was out of the game and all of a sudden his first fight back is an immediate title match. I don't like that aspect of things. The idea of a super fight. It's very controversial on whether or not people want to have super fights or not. But if you get to a certain point and you're able to achieve in that level, then I think that gives you a free pass to get up there, unless you go on a very bad losing streak, like BJ Penn. So, Jose Aldo, the fact that he was one of the most dominant champions of all time in their featherweight industry, in the featherweight division in the UFC, I think that buys him to always have free reign to get back into contendership, as long as it looks like that he's not going through a major downhill slope. So, the exact opposite of that would be BJ Penn. BJ Penn, on top of the world champion in different divisions. And so, BJ Penn, after doing so well for himself, dropped down drastically, went on a losing streak, But the difference between his losing streak versus someone like Yoel Romero and Jose Aldo is that it doesn't look like that they're washed up. If you look at Yoel Romero's fight against Paulo Costa, that fight could have gone either way. Yes, Romero got on a losing streak and he lost to Paulo Costa, but it could have been argued easily that Yoel Romero could have won that fight. Jose Aldo, in all his most recent exchanges, shows that he is more than capable of competing in an incredibly high level, and it is not that out of the realm to think that Jose Aldo can go and defeat somebody like a Henry Cejudo, really, or compete in featherweight or even bantamweights. It's not that far off the realm to understand, really. What Leslie Smith is arguing about is that merit should be the basis of you getting title shots, but I think overall merit in your career should do it, not just your recent fights. And if you perform well in your most recent fights, then that's all good and all. But every fighter who is currently a champion has gone through a winning streak and has earned a title shot to get that belt in the first place. So I don't agree with Leslie Smith in that scenario. Worked all their life for. So I kind of agree with her, but at the same time I really don't. So coming up right after break then, let's talk about two people who are all of a sudden beefing, Joanna Jacek and Colby Covington. Right back after the break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we discussed about fighters getting title shots despite going on losing streaks, and a fighter that at one point one could have made the argument for being washed up was Joanna Jacek, because she wasn't doing all well for herself after losing to Rose Namajunas, after losing to Valentina Shevchenko, but she bounced back to getting Michelle Waterson. And although Michelle Waterson Michelle Waterson is one of the most underrated fighters in all of like fighting in the general sense. I think she goes into too many fights being billed as an underdog, even though she has got a really good all-around striking game and ground game. Very underrated. I hope she does well in her next fight, which was cancelled, but hopefully will be rebooked. But Michelle Waterson isn't in the high tier when it comes to contenders who are vying for a championship fight. Michelle Waterson is decent, but she ain't that high in the totem pole. And when Joanna Jacek defeated her, there was speculation on I know that there were some people arguing that Joanna Jacek didn't really deserve a title shot against Weili Zhang, considering the fact that the level of competition she defeated versus the level of competition into which she lost to, there's such a disparity between the two that the win over Michelle Waterson shouldn't have bought her a title shot immediately. Now, that gave us a great title fight in which Joanna Jacek could have possibly won if the judges were scoring the fight differently. Whatever. But Joanna Jacek, I believe that she deserved that title fight, considering that Rose Namajunas declined it. It would go over to the next best fighter who would be available in the division, and that was Joanna. We got a classic fight, possibly the best fight of the year, through Joanna versus Weili Zhang. So I'm happy about that scenario. So Leslie Smith, I think she needs to frame how she views super fights and the idea that you have to have merit in order to have a title fight in the UFC, because there are a lot of fighters out there that have the merit to go back up and to explain why they should go get a title fight. It's not that despairing or as gloom as Leslie Smith has been talking about. But Joanna Jacek, so I talk about that there was a chance that Joanna Jacek by this time last year was almost considered washed up. And a fighter that did say that in actuality was Colby Covington. So, MMAfighting.com, this is from that site, and it is reported that although Colby Covington has made the name of himself on the back of his outspoken nature, many were caught off guard by his comments regarding American top team stablemate Joanna Jacek in the aftermath of her UFC 248 title clash with Weili Zhang, as well as calling the former champion washed up on the back of her split decision loss on this week's Eurobash. In an interview that was recorded before ATT introduced a zero-tolerance rule on teammates trash-talking each other, he stated that him not bringing Joanna Jacek on a date added to the ill will between them. He also claimed that the strawweight was hooking up with Jorge Masvidal and stated that she was not a good person. When discussing her all-time classic Zhang and her recovery, Jacek also took some time to respond to her polarizing teammates. It's part of his act, Jacek said. He's not a very polite or a smart guy, so he doesn't know what to do. He needs other people to make himself big, so I don't want to talk about this guy. You know, I can tell you guys that it's a shame for us. It's a shame that he's talking crap like this. It's all ugly things. He's a dirty guy, and I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it. Although the highly ranked strawweight did not get into too much detail when it came to chaos, she did underline that she was lying about everything that he had said about her. He's lying, you know. I don't know why he's such a big liar, and I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to waste my time talking about him. So, Joanna Jacek and Colby Covington are now beefing, and I kind of agree with Joanna Jacek in this scenario in that, like, it's just Colby being Colby. You just gotta let Colby Covington do his like WWE style promos and stuff. Now, what do I think about Colby Covington doing this, like, WWE style trash talking kind of promo that really doesn't lead to anything but give him heel heat because he wants to play a character so he can be marketable? I respect Colby Covington as a fighter. His fight against Kamaru Usman was absolutely great. Very enjoyable. I give a lot of respect to Colby Covington and his fights against Rafael dos Anjos, and also his fight against Kamaru Usman. He's a really, really good fighter. Really great pressure fighter. Even though he lacks punching power, his ability to apply pressure and his wrestling game is very underrated. He's a really great MMA mixed martial artist. Really great fighter. I believe that if you were to have I believe that he has a chance to defeat fighters like Tyron Woodley, Leon Edwards, and Kamaru Usman. I think with another year's worth of prep time, Colby Covington could be a potential world champion this time next year. It could happen. Now, is it really annoying that he's constantly doing this like WWE thing? It gets to you sometimes, really, which is, it does get to you, but you have to, like, kind of ignore him to some extent, though. Admittedly, though, I am it's very hard to watch or to listen to Chael Sonnen when he does an analysis for a fight. Because you absolutely cannot tell. Same thing with this. So Ben Askren, Colby Covington, Kevin Lee, and Michael Chiesa, like, last year, and, like, Chael Sonnen, all those people are all constantly in full-on play character mode, and the characters that they play is so cartoony and so ridiculous that you just want to boo against them. But then after booing against them, you get kind of tired hating on them, and then you start becoming kind of indifferent, and then they don't become like money makers or they push the needle that high for selling pay-per-views. I get it. I get that they're trying to sell a character in order to sell a pay-per-view to go get the casual audience in. But here's the thing. The casual audience are not as stupid as a lot of these people want to think they are. They're not being as smart as they think they are cutting these wrestling promos. Because really, by the end of the day, if you cut these wrestling style promos and you don't end up winning, you look really bad. That's why when I think I saw a press conference one time where it was Tito Ortiz and Chael Sonnen. They're talking a lot of smack to each other during a Bellator fight. In the end, like Tito Ortiz defeated Chael Sonnen, and Chael Sonnen went on to talk about how the Tito Ortiz wife was this like awful person, then like that he's cheap and that he's washed up and all that stuff. And Chael Sonnen then ended his line. And then there's a catchphrase that Chael Sonnen has always tried to say in the UFC and in Bellator that just never caught on, and it was like, "Score 1 point for the bad guy." And I'm like, what? And then there's Tito Ortiz or Anderson Silva or whoever he's facing, or like Fedor Emelianenko. They all give the exact same look. Like Chael Sonnen goes and say, "Oh, you know what? I am gonna win this fight. You know why? Because score 1 point for the bad guy." And he's pointing at himself and people in the... The journalists in the media room, they're all groaning. You can see Tito Ortiz or whoever's fighting groaning. They're rolling their eyes. You can see the promoter kind of giggling. I don't know if they're in on it, that people treat them as a joke. I am unsure about that. I really am. I like to believe that they're aware that people treat them like Ben Askren, Chael Sonnen, and Colby Covington, and Kevin Lee, and Michael Chiesa. I think they're aware that people are treating them as a joke. That their press conference, it also happens like a fighter like Alexander Hernandez, where people don't respect him, and people are just laughing at you for the most part, but you're completely they think that they're laughing at you because, okay, no, I like it. So, these are the fighters that think that they're laughing with them, but are unaware that someone's laughing at them. It's ridiculous. This reminds me of a time also when Chael Sonnen was doing promos against Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan laughed it off and was like, "You're playing a character. I get it." So, I'd be a lot more happier if there were a lot less MMA fighters who are playing characters and they can just be themselves. Because it's not really appealing, to be honest with you. It doesn't really draw a crowd or draw tickets, essentially. Like, people, like characters like Floyd Mayweather, they're natural. Like, they don't need to attempt to talk like The Rock from the WWE to go get heel heat. Like, his presence gets you heel heat, okay then? But like, people like Ben Askren and Chael Sonnen and Colby Covington, they need to learn when to like stop. They need to learn when to turn off that WWE style kind of character, so people can respect them a lot more. I understand that they're making money, I think. Even, I'm not sure if they're making money in the first place through doing this. But it's kind of, it's getting to a point now where it's just getting really tiresome at this point. It really is. So, coming up right after the break then, there was an interesting video that talked about Weili Zhang, and Weili Zhang's idea of traditional martial arts being a part of her MMA fighting style. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, and we'll be right back right after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So, we were talking about Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Colby Covington beefing over the most ridiculous of reasons. Not really any substance to it. It's just Colby Covington playing a character and Joanna Jędrzejczyk's ignoring him for the very most part, though. But Colby Covington, the stigma around Colby is that he is a fake guy. That he's just playing a character. Everything about him is fake. Other than his ability to fight really good, his mystique and his persona and his character is fake and it's not real. And the idea of like mystique and fakeness and something not being real, that blends into the idea of traditional Chinese martial arts. And then there's a person like Weili Zhang who comes from a background of traditional Chinese martial arts. She did some Shaolin growing up. She did some Shaolin. She did Sandi. She did like this like something similar to like Tai Chi, kind of wushu, kind of Chinese fighting styles. She comes from that background, and to anyone who doesn't know, there's a huge fine line between traditional martial artists and mixed martial artists. People from the MMA community think that there's a belief that traditional martial artists are essentially conmen, and that traditional martial artists are teaching young youth that this is the right way of fighting. That in order to become strong, in order to defend yourself, you have to be a follower of traditional martial arts. And then you got people from the mixed martial arts community saying, no, people who fight the traditional martial arts, they're fake, they're dishonest, they're not true. It's all kung fu nonsense that you see from television. There's a YouTuber that I follow right now. I forgot his name. I think his name is Ramsey. So there's a there's a practitioner of MMA fighting named Ramsey, and he goes on to talk about how traditional martial arts is tricking young people into believing that stuff they see from television, from the kung fu stuff, or them flying through the air with swords, pretty much like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. If you've ever watched the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I recommend people do, it's this insane, crazy kung fu movie where when they fight each other, it's just them throwing out their hands very quickly as if it's like a Dragon Ball cartoon fight. They're flying, I don't know, like 20 feet up in the air, doing cartwheels, doing somersaults. They have these swords and they're doing waka waka, like the most cringiest thing, the most cringy, insane choreographed thing you can ever think of. And Ramsey and a lot of other MMA purists would all say traditional martial artists are implying that this is the real way of how fighting should be. Like this very cartoony, over-the-top, Dragon Ball Z, anime, cartoony fight style. Something straight out of Looney Tunes, really. And then you have a person like Weili Zhang, who comes from this background, and then she talks about how her traditional martial arts background helps her out, and now she's currently one of the best fighters in the entire world. She's a current women's champion. So this sparked up even another debate. That is traditional martial arts like Wushu, Shaolin, Tai Chi. In the promo video where it was when it was Joanna Jacek versus Weili Zhang, while they were showing Joanna Jacek in like a gym, hitting the punching bags as hard as she could or how fast she can, she's climbing up mountains, she's doing jump rope. We see Weili Zhang doing the traditional like Wushu, Shaolin thing, where she's got like the traditional kung fu outfit on. She's doing these like meditative poses, and now there is the debate of whether or not like Weili Zhang's background is harming future MMA practitioners into wanting to be interested into MMA, and that there's people who are saying, "Hey, Weili Zhang, she's fooling these young people into believing that Wushu, Shaolin, and Kung Fu, all that stuff actually applies in a real world fight setting." And there's an interview. There's an interview with Weili Zhang about this. I'm not gonna go into the story of the MMA practitioner in China right now, who is going through a period of time to which like he's being exiled from his gym because he's beating up all these like quote unquote martial arts masters. You got people who claim themselves to be martial arts masters who think that they can telekinetically punch a person from across the room through their chi or from their mana energy or chakra. It's like Naruto. It's like sounds absolutely ridiculous. But Weili Zhang talks about traditional martial arts, and then she's saying how her growing up with Shaolin and Sandi fighting style, that those were essentially just like essential pieces that were used to which she applied over when she actually moved towards mixed martial arts, because she's only been a mixed martial artist for about 5 years at this point. Less than 5 years. She's been training under mixed martial arts for about less than 5 years. And she says that her Sandi Shaolin fight style pretty much were good in getting her to become better as an MMA fighter, because stuff that you get from Shaolin and from Sandi is the idea of positioning, the idea of control, being able to... The fact that she's doing a sport already at an early age, that involves a lot of movement, a lot of like aerobics kind of based exercises, where you're doing some punching, where you're doing some kicking. She's doing some grappling early on. And so, even though she's not learning traditional American Greco-style wrestling, even though she's not learning boxing, even though she's not doing kickboxing, she has some elements from that, which then helps her out when she does do actual kickboxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. A way to think about it would be Kenpo. So, I think everybody can agree with this. Nobody will say that Kenpo is a good martial arts if you want to learn how to be an actual good fighter. I think generally everyone can see that. Kenpo in itself is just like the dummy's guide into learning how to throw basic strikes 101. And like if there's a book that says Dummy's Guide into How to Throw Basic Strikes, it would be Kenpo. That's what it really is though. But you will never in a real life setting ever be able to utilize Kenpo in a way that it would be good for you in a real world fight setting. It's just not going to happen. But if you already know Kenpo, then the idea of throwing a knee or throwing a high kick or throwing a punch or an elbow, if you know some basics of Kenpo and then you go to a Muay Thai class, you would do a lot more better developing your skills from a Kenpo to a Muay Thai fighter compared to a guy who has no freaking background in martial arts all of a sudden going towards Kenpo. And that is what Weili Zhang is alluding to, is the fact that although she didn't train specifically in mixed martial arts growing up as a kid, she has some foundation of mixed martial arts, which was then carried over onto mixed martial arts. Which is very understandable. It's the reason why you have like a fighter like Greg Hardy, who, although not the cleanest fighter in the world, he has a football background. Like, he has a football background, and because he comes from an athletic background, that then helps him out in future, in his development as an MMA fighter. This doesn't work out all the well. This doesn't work out all the time. So it may work for a person like Weili Zhang and Tony Ferguson, people who like studied wushu and the idea of like parodying and like hand movements and being able to counter fighting. There is some elements of counter fighting that is part of wushu, that if you were to apply wushu specifically in a competitive field where you're fighting somebody and you just have wushu, it's not going to do that well for you. But if you have wushu on top of your boxing pedigree, that's a huge game changer, and it's going to help you out a lot more when it comes to parodying, when it comes to ducking, when it comes to movement of the arms. It's an addition instead of a subtraction, and it's not really a hindrance. Traditional Chinese martial arts is not a hindrance when you're able to apply traditional martial arts onto another form of martial arts that can be used in MMA. That can be used in MMA. I compared a little bit to Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu game. Yeah, Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu game is out of this world. Absolutely amazing. It's great. But that jiu-jitsu game can only take you so far, only up to a certain level. Even Khabib Nurmagomedov, if he didn't have his boxing background and being able to like, learning head movement, learning when to go dive in for a takedown after feigning in for a right hook and then ducking under for a double underleg takedown. Stuff like that blends in together. He's able to blend in boxing with wrestling, and although boxing and wrestling is at a much more higher level in the world of mixed martial arts compared to like Shaolin Wushu and Jiu-Jitsu, if you were to combine two different things together and you're able to make something out of it, then I think it is useful to an extent. But if you're to get one thing alone, that's very weak. So if you're only to train only in Shaolin but no boxing, then you're not going to be a good fighter. But if you train in boxing and you have some aspect of Shaolin on top of your boxing, then that's going to help you out. And I think that's what Weili Zhang is referring to on how traditional Chinese martial arts can help someone develop into being a better MMA fighter. And so, coming up right after the break, then we'll be talking about a possible future opponent of Weili Zhang, and that is Jessica Andrade, coming up right after the break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
So we were discussing Weili Zhang and her background in traditional Chinese martial arts, helping her in her developments as a mixed martial artist. And when I look back at Weili Zhang, she talks about the fact that she was a fan of kung fu movies, and she was inspired to become a professional fighter through watching kung fu movies where people will start flying up in the air doing somersaults, and Ronda Rousey. I kind of support it, actually. When you look at fighters like Israel Adesanya, Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis, Sage Northcutt when he was just starting out, and Weili Zhang, all these fighters are having some aspect of Kung Fu coming to their fight game, makes them very fun to watch. Let's all not pretend that we all secretly at one point were fans of Bruce Lee movies. Like, Bruce Lee movies are fun to watch, okay? They're fun, they're really cool. Now, they're not realistic at all. It's incredibly not realistic to go think that real fighting is like how Bruce Lee fought, but it's enjoyable, it's fun, it's exciting, And when we see fighters try to emulate some of that into an actual real fight, even a lot of us kind of geek out a wee bit, like, oh my gosh, he did the thing! Anderson Silva versus Israel Adesanya. I rewatched that fight again. I rewatched that fight. And that fight pretty much is the closest thing you're ever gonna have to a real-life, legitimate Kung Fu martial arts fight. It really is. I recommend everyone and anyone to go rewatch that if you can. And when you, and if you do actually, just watch it and be like, wow, it is definitely unnecessary for Israel Adesanya to throw out that many high kicks, knowing that he's leaving himself open, but it is so cool to see that. And when you see Weili Zhang do her cool Shaolin Tai Chi stuff, even you have to say, wow, that's really cool. And so I don't see an issue learning traditional Chinese martial arts. Kind of like how Weili Zhang is doing it though, as long as you do what she did, and that you're blending it in with something else. And so, if you were to be in a real fight, you're not a dead fish essentially. Like you can handle yourself because you've got training from multiple martial arts that will help you out in the scenario. The more you know, the better you are. That's what I believe in. And so, a contender coming up for Weili Zhang, who we could possibly see fight again, would be Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade was the strawweight champion until Weili Zhang TKO'd her. It was a vicious fight. It really was a measurement of how strong and powerful Weili Zhang really is. Weili Zhang has an obvious strength advantage and in the clinch advantage that I have not seen anyone else have that can go outmatch her. Except for maybe Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but even then it was by slight margin. As of this point right now, I don't see anyone outperforming Weili Zhang to the point of dominance. Really, if you're to fight Weili Zhang, you have to be on points. She's not a fighter that you can go easy steamroll for the belt. She really isn't. And Jessica Andrade will easily top for me on that, actually. So Jessica Andrade, she lost the strawweight belt to Weili Zhang, and now she's prepping up against another champion in Rose Namajunas, and she converted her house as a gym. This comes from MMA Fighting. With one confirmed death due to the coronavirus in Brazil, the city's mayor has ordered gyms, malls, and parks to close and even blocked access to beaches. Jessica Andrade, a former UFC strawweight champion who lives in the city, has been forced to adapt. She is currently scheduled to rematch Rose Namajunas at UFC 249, a pay-per-view that's expected to take place on April 18th. We don't know the location yet. It could be in Florida, possibly. But according to Andrade, she says, "I'm staying at home and training the way I can. I brought Bruna Brasil, who has a fighting style and body type similar to Rose, and to train with me here. We're quarantined at home following the Ministry of Health's orders and keep training hard. My weight is going down well, so I don't see a much difference. I keep training hard, but at home. I'm glad I was able to build the structure here at home. Mats, bags, mitts, and weights to lift." Andrade's conditioning coach calls her every morning to advise her on what they're planning to do. The strategy is already set, Andrade said, and Coach Gillard Piranha make sure to watch every training session to pay close attention to what needs to be worked on. Andrade says, "I video call him during every training and he guides me, says that I have to do and where I need to be better at when I can video call him. I just filmed the training session, sent it to him and said it's all good. No one leaves home. We train at home with guidance over the phone. It's been okay since she's," her coach says, "it's been okay since she's obedient and tries to work hard, really hard. Bruna Brasil has a body type and fighting style that is very similar to Rose, so we'll do the way we can until everything calms down. It's not the ideal way to prepare for a fight, of course, but we need to take all the precautions. We're doing it the best way possible." So we're looking at this. So we're looking at Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. I've already made a prediction that I believe Rose Namajunas will win this fight via a decision. So Rose Namajunas is coming to the fight as the favorite to win this, which is contrasting when Andrade came to the fight against Rose Namajunas. When these two one fighters fought for the first time, Andrade was the obvious favorite going in. When you look at Andrade's game, you thought, Andrade game is a slightly toned down version of Weili Zhang. An insane clinch game, insane amount of power, deadly accuracy, a very strong chin, very hard to knock out, very powerful on the ground. Jessica Andrade has essentially all the tools, really. Now, whether or not she can utilize those tools to go and beat out opponents, that's the question mark, really. Because when you look at Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade, it was obvious why someone would pick Jessica Andrade in defeating Rose Namajunas. Because Jessica Andrade has just a better all-around overall game. And then when the fight actually happened between Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade, it was evident that Rose Namajunas started outdoing everything that we thought Andrade would do onto Rose. Rose Namajunas' striking game was unbelievable. Absolutely amazing. I've never seen better one-sided striking exchanges from a fighter than Rose Namajunas. If you haven't checked it out yet, go look up Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas. You'll be impressed of how good Rose Namajunas is, especially since she came into the fight as the underdog. And so when Jessica Andrade fought Rose Namajunas, Rose had an answer for everything that Andrade did. In the boxing game, Rose Namajunas was ducking in, she was ducking out, she was parrying some shots, she was swaying away, she was moving around perfectly fine. She had all the momentum carrying over from her recent fights against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She was doing really well for herself, without a doubt. She was winning the first round. Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan were the commentators for that fight. They both agreed that there is no way in heck that Rose Namajunas lost the first round. It was that decisive. One could argue that Rose Namajunas won the first round 8-10. I mean, 10-8. She won 10-8 with Andrade being an 8 and Namajunas being a 10. There was one scenario that kind of foreshadowed how the fight would end up. And that was when Jessica Andrade got one first single leg onto Namajunas. Namajunas was hanging on the cage. And then Andrade lifted up Namajunas. And Namajunas was able to transition the slam onto an arm triangle, which is amazing. Like, I really thought Andrade was about to lose in that scenario. That would have been an epic, amazing way for Namajunas to win the fight. But instead, she got slammed, she went for the arm triangle, and then right after that, Namajunas got right back up. Then the second round came in. Andrade went for the takedown, went for the single leg again, and Rose Namajunas, instead, the way how her body was in the middle of the air, she was obviously trying to go for another arm triangle, or another submission move coming from the bottom as she lands down, but instead, I think she didn't tuck her chin in, which led to her landing onto her neck, and that ended up poorly for Andrade. One could argue that Andrade didn't necessarily defeat Rose Namajunas in that first fight. That was more of a case of Namajunas getting herself in a situation where she was trying to aim for a submission, because I think she believed that, hey, you know what? I almost got the submission move down in the first round from her trying to slam me. If I get her to slam me again, I might go for the submission move again, and this time I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to go and submit her. So, my theory was that Namajunas prepped herself up in a bad position, thinking that she can get a submission move, submission hold in. It didn't work out well for her, and then she got knocked out from a slam. So going to the rematch here, I think Namajunas isn't going to make as many mistakes as she did the last time, and Jessica Andrade will fight a lot more passive. So it could honestly go either way here, but whoever wins this fight probably is going to be the favorite going into fighting against Weili Zhang by the end of this year or early next year. So major title implications here. We are seeing two former strawweight champions go at it, and one of them who was considered the best just a year ago, and another one considered one of the most fiercest all-around strikers of all time in the strawweight division. It's going to be insane. So, be prepared for UFC 249 if it does happen. Andrade vs. Rose Namajunas. We'll be back right after the break with some more MMA news.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we talked about Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade, a major fight with major title implications. That's being booked for UFC 249. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And a fight that's hoping to be rebooked will be the flyweight bout between Ashley Evans-Smith and Molly McCann. This is coming in from WMMA rankings, in that after UFC London was cancelled last week, flyweights Ashley Evans-Smith and Molly McCann are hoping their fight is rebooked. The pair was scheduled to meet at UFC London Fight Night event on March 21. However, the event was cancelled just days before due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Evans-Smith and McCann hopped on a planned Instagram live stream to discuss their matchup and the events that unfolded. Despite the confusion upon landing in London with travel bans and such, Rebel Girl is open to return to the UK for a fight. Hopefully, you and I could still fight. I'll look for a comeback in London. If London's not an option, Liverpool's Meatball suggests the UFC Fight Night card in Dublin, Ireland on August 15th. If London doesn't happen, I'm just going to call for Dublin in August. We get a good reception there, to be honest. Both fighters share mutual respect, and honestly, this will be a very fun fight to see. I can see it happening in Dublin. Dana White has said that events coming up after UFC 249 is going to be consistent. We are going to expect events to be lined up how they should be, and there is prediction right now coming in from the U.S. government that we can expect normal stabilization happening by sometime middle to end of next month, hopefully. So Ashley Evans-Smith and Molly McCann, that's a fight that we can expect possibly happening by August. Also, it's also been rumored that Dana White has said that fights that were canceled could potentially be happening sometime during the holidays for rescheduling. So if it's around the August to December, between August and December, I can see a lot of fights that we missed out initially. We can see the Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards fight, or the Tyron Woodley Colby Covington fight. We can see the Michelle Waterson fight. Versus Carla Esparza. We can see all those fights coming in between the months of August to December, potentially happening. So going in, while those fighters are prepped up for the future, potentially I'm really excited for Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza. That's going to be a dark horse fight of the night contender there, I really believe. While those fights are prepping up to possibly happening in the future, we've got 13 fighters being removed from the UFC roster, them being Tanya Evinger and Jody Escobel. So, 4 women's fighters have been dropped by the UFC. One of them being Tanya Evinger. Tanya Evinger is one of my personal underdog story favorites, really, then, because she goes in there and she doesn't look like the most. She looks very different. That's what I'm gonna say. And, like, if you look at Tanya Evinger, then you look at the likes of like Paige Van Zandt and like Ronda Rousey. And even when Rosa Namajunas had like long hair, she looks very different. Tanya Evinger looks like she just came from a time machine from the late 90s, like biker era, and it came into now, because she looks so different. I like the fact that that even her like kind of her character and identity comes across very different. When Tanya Evinger fought Aspen Ladd, Daniel Cormier and I think Dominic Cruz talking about how much like Tanya Evinger is this total like BA in the world. Like she's tough, she loves fighting, she's hard as nails. Tanya Evinger will go out there and she enjoys getting hurt. Like, oh man, like they were putting over Tanya Evinger, being this tough as nails fighter, very tough. She is tough, she's very strong. She's got a heart. She's got a heart full of like rocks, and that if you beat her, you gotta beat her down as much as you can because she is tough to deal with. You've gotta be a special fighter to defeat Tanya Evinger. And that special fighter was Aspen Ladd, whose ground game TKO, in which she was whose ground game led her to a TKO against Tanya Evinger. And sadly, people losing is these 4 women's fighters are all being laid off after losing their most recent fights. So Tanya Evinger lost against Aspen Ladd, which nothing to be ashamed of. Aspen Ladd is a top 5 contender right now in her division. We have Talita Bernardo. Bernardo went 1-3 in the promotion. Overall, she's 5-4 though, so it's not as bad as you think it is, but still 1-3. She made a short notice debut in 2017, losing to Marlon Renaud via TKO in the last 10 seconds of the bout. In between losses to Irene Aldana and Viviana Araujo, Bernardo won a unanimous decision over Sarah Moraz. So she's got one victory on her belts, going 1-3 overall. In the UFC, sad to see that. Brazil's De Puado, it's Isabella De Puado, I'm sorry for saying that wrong, but fought only once in the promotion, losing her debut to Ariane Lipski via unanimous decision in November, soon after she failed an in-competition and out-of-competition drug resulting in a 2-year USADA sanction. So yeah, don't take drugs, kids. And then we have Jodie Escobar, who's 6'6" in her entire career, 6 wins, 6 losses. The former Invicta FC contender went 0-4 in the promotion after singing in 2017. She lost decisions to Carolina Kowalowicz. It's hard to say her name, but I know her. Carolina, Jessica Aguilar, Angela Hill, and Hannah Cyphers. Okay, Hannah Cyphers, Carolina, and Jessica Aguilar. Those are not pushovers. Those are really top tier, really legitimate good fighters who you could see competing against the top 5 in their respective divisions. Like, it's not that far off to think that. So, sadly, these 4 fighters, got caught up for the UFC. Hopefully, we could see them maybe in the future again in a UFC card. We might see them pop up in a Bellator or an Invicta show. Bellator recently had been trying to get some ex or former UFC fighters to join their ranks. They have Chris Cyborg, they have Leslie Smith, and I could see them trying to go for a Tanya Evinger or an Escobar coming to the rankings. So there's that idea happening. And then we have Paige Van Zandt. So Paige Van Zandt finally, after getting injured, she will then be removing her arm cast, and she's now training for a fight coming up in UFC for 2020. She says on her Instagram post with 37,000 likes, wow, that's amazing. My sister, who is a huge MMA fan, women's MMA fan, she doesn't like Paige Van Zandt because she's really popular, but she doesn't really win that much, really. Here's the thing. Paige Van Zandt is I think is a poster child of what Leslie Smith doesn't like in mixed martial arts. I think Leslie Smith is looking at Paige Van Zandt and being like, why is that model fighting here in the MMA world, man? I fought more than her. My merit should get me more fights than Paige Van Zandt. But Paige Van Zandt, man, she's popular. She's really popular. In her Instagram, with her 37,000 likes, Paige Van Zandt goes on to say, cast is off 100%. Let's freaking go. Training in full effect in my garage with my husband. Lol, first thing first. Let's heal the world after I'm coming to fight. So there's been speculation now on who will be Paige Van Zandt's next opponents. We could see Michelle Waterson versus Paige Van Zandt yet again, which would be a very interesting, fun fight. Paige Van Zandt has been going off on Twitter in recent months, saying that she's willing to go fight even contenders like Rose Namajunas also, and Jessica Andrade, and even Aspen. It's very. Paige Van Zandt believes in her own hype, at the very least. I think the UFC wants to see Paige Van Zandt succeed. I think everyone wants to see Paige Van Zandt succeed because she looks like $1 million. If she were to become champion, oh my gosh, she would easily be seen in a lot of movies and TV shows without a doubt. She's got a superstar quality about her. Now, whether or not those superstar qualities can translate her with wins in the octagon, that's a very different story. There's no announcement on who will be fighting. Paige Van Zandt in the future, but hopefully whoever she fights, we're going to see a good showing. And that's all I got for you for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.